Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Christy Galley. I'm the Public Facilities Manager here with CDBG, Local Government Assistance. Thank you for attending the workshop. I apologize for the short notice, but I'm sure y'all are anxious to get started on your programs. Congratulations on your award as well. I just want to go over some housekeeping before we get started. Please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we are going to compile the questions and answers after the webinar and post them online, and we can also email them out to you. We have not assigned the projects to a grant representative yet, but once we do, they will be sending out letters regarding any application revisions or any additional information if we need it. I anticipate that being probably in the next week or so. If you have procured consultants, please get with us regarding the contract and some of the items that you are able to begin working on until the contract is sent out. If you have not procured a consulting or engineer firm, please get with us regarding the procurement. Our office is here to provide technical assistance, and I know some of you are new to CDBG and the regulations that come with the funding. So we are available to set up one-on-one conversations to assist you and to walk you through the process. Thank you for applying. Okay, so this is our HVAC Improvement 2021 Grantee Workshop. So our introduction of staff, so our director, Tracy Watts, and our assistant director, Heather Paul, are actually not able to be with us today. And we have Kimberly Rogers, who is the policy and program coordinator. Myself, I'm the program manager. Jeff Tessier is the engineer. William Hall is a financial analyst, program specialist, and he also is our procurement guru. We have Janelle Dickey, who is a financial analyst. Victoria Cavalier, who is also a financial analyst. Anisha Favorite, who is a community development specialist. Jimmy Martin, who is a community development specialist. Layla Argrave, who is a community development specialist, and Denise McGee, who is a community development specialist. So again, if you could put your questions in the Q&A box, we will get to them hopefully today, if not by tomorrow. So the first presentation is going to be the grant agreement conditions by Jimmy Martin.
Christy, can we get the slide up?
Jimmy did it forward. It says grant agreement conditions on mine.
All I'm seeing is introduction of staff, Tracy Watts, Heather Paul. Oh, there we go. I got grant agreement conditions now.
Okay.
All right. Those of you, some of you may have already received this and some of you have not yet, but you will receive via mail and email an authorization to incur cost letter. This authorized planning and administration costs. It also permits you to begin the environmental review record, permits plans and specs to be prepared, and describes penalties for not meeting certain deadlines. If there's a problem meeting the time frame, please contact your grant administrator as soon as possible. Don't wait until the time is expired or right before it expires. If there's some kind of issues and you need an extension or need to request an extension, any kind of discussion whatsoever, please do so as early as possible. And I don't want to stress this enough. Do not advertise for bids or begin construction at this time. Okay. You will also be receiving in the future a transmittal of a blank grant agreement. The instructions for each item below will be in the cover letter, and that letter will accompany the grant agreement, obviously. Once you receive it, please sign the grant agreement and return it within 30 days. Sign the grant agreement, but please do not date it. Some additional forms that that letter will ask for is an authorized signature form. You need to assign at least 2 people who will sign the request for payment. I suggest that you do at least 3, because if somebody's on vacation and then you can't, then you have to wait a week for the RFP to be signed and sent to us. That's going to hold up payment of contractors for a week, and they really don't like that. The certifying officer signs and dates the form. Make sure that the typed signatures exactly match the written signatures. So if you sign your name John Q. Public, then it should be typed John Q. Public, and your signature should be John Q. Public. If it says John Q. Public and you sign John Public, then we're going to have to send back that RFP for a revision, and because the signatures need to be original and have to match perfectly. If for some reason your parish president or the chief elected official is not the person who's the certifying officer for the grantee, then you need to send a council resolution in stating that somebody else is authorized to certify the signatures. And that tends to happen when the mayor or the parish president wants to sign RFPs. You also will be requested to set up an EFT form. You have to contact the Office of Statewide Reporting and Accounting Policy, OSRAP, at the email address you see on the screen or by phone. Do not use an old existing form if you have one. You will also need to send in a voided check along with the EFT form to OSRAP. A request for vendor information form, and that includes the bank information and a W-9 form. Everything else is going to come back to me except for the EFT form and the voided check. Those will go directly to OSRAP. If you also want to send me a copy of what you send OSRAP, that's fine. Next slide is, where are the forms? If you go to our website, you can see our web address right there. I'm going to refer you to the 2021 Grantee Handbook. That's for our CDBG grants. However, a lot of the information is the same, and this is where you will find that. So you'll go to the page and you'll click on 2021 Grantee Handbook. That'll pull up the whole handbook, or you can pull up 2021 Grantee Handbook exhibits, and you'll see, if you go to the next slide, and this is an old picture, but you can see that A3 is authorized signature form. So that's where you would get the authorized signature form that you would need to fill out. Okay. You'll also get an application revision letter. That's what Ms. Galley was talking about earlier, getting the letter from here. And you're going to have a 4-month deadline. Now, some of you have different AIC dates than others. I believe the first AIC dates were November 15th. Were June 15th. No, July 15th of 21. So 4 months from that would be November 15th. So whatever the date is on your authorization to incur cost letter, you have 4 months to clear your contract conditions. And typical things that we ask for are financial management questionnaires, surety bonds, the audits we pull ourselves off of the legislative auditor's website, environmental review record. You must receive authority from us to publish the final notice and request release of funds by the deadline. A performance schedule, a fair housing assurance, a Section 504 assurance, residential anti-displacement and relocation plan and certification, any revisions to the application that we may ask for, plans and specs and final cost estimate must be submitted to OCD by the deadline, and any other documentation that we may ask. So you have 4 months to get all of this stuff in. Once again, if you need extra time, please contact your grant rep as soon as possible. Next slide. Risk analysis. Based on your familiarity with the program, you may be assigned a different risk analysis. If you've had a lot of CDBG grants in the past and you haven't had any issues with that, you probably get a low risk. And that just means you will give technical assistance if you call in and you need something. If you categorize as a medium risk, you can request an on-site technical assistance visit from us, or you can just call us and we can do technical assistance over the phone. And then if you fall in a high-risk grantee, we'll come out, do a technical assistance visit before we come out and monitor. And that will allow us to try to eliminate any problems that may occur. My name is Jimmy Martin. My phone number is 225-342-7412. That's the main office. I'm also, my desk number is 342-7421. Feel free to call me about any of the contract stuff that you may need. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janelle Dickey. I'm one of the financial analysts, and I'm going to go over financial management for this program. First of all, I want to let you know that all of this information is in our grantee handbook that can be found on our website, and the financial section begins on page 7. Okay. For accounting purposes, you're expected to maintain all source documentation. You have to maintain evidence of expenditures of LCDBG funds paid to your contractors and other parties. Surety bonding or fidelity insurance is required on everyone who will be authorized to sign checks. And the best way to record LCDBG funding is in a separate capital projects fund or a separate special revenue fund. This is so that we can clearly see revenues and expenditures. Cash management and payment. Okay, you're expected to maintain a separate LCDBG bank account strictly for this project. This account should be used for all deposits and for payments to your vendors. It must be a non-interest bearing account, and your checks should be pre-numbered, not counter checks. Each check requires 2 signatures, and this should be signatures that are the same people authorized for this function on your financial management questionnaire. And you should write your LCDBG grant agreement number on all of your checks. Clearing account is something that we allow only with special written permission. If this is done, all invoices have to be paid in advance and checks have to clear prior to reimbursement. Separate financial statements for LCDBG will still need to be maintained. For internal controls and bonding, the financial management questionnaire is basically the document that outlines your policy for financial management. So it's very important that you follow this form. It's going to list everyone that's authorized to perform different financial functions. You need to make sure that at least 2 people are listed as authorized to sign requests for payment, and at least 2 people are authorized to sign checks. The people who are responsible for preparing fiscal year and financial statements should have the skills and knowledge to apply generally accepted accounting principles. And if there are any changes in personnel, it's important that you submit an updated financial management questionnaire. Surety bond and insurance, again, is required for everyone who's authorized to sign checks. It needs to be current, and if an FMQ financial management questionnaire is updated, the documentation for bonding needs to be submitted as well, and that again needs to be current. Audit requirements. It's important to note that LCDBG funds are federal funds, and the level of the report that is needed is based on the level of revenue that the grantee receives. If an entity expends 750, you can go to the next slide, Christy, please. If an entity expends 750,000 or more in federal funds, and that includes all federal funds, including LCDBG, a single audit will be required. It's the grantee's responsibility to procure or otherwise arrange for the audit, to prepare appropriate financial statements, including the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, to provide the auditor with access to your records, to promptly follow up and take corrective action on audit findings. And it's important that your audit be timely. If an extension has been granted by the legislative auditor, please send a copy of that extension to your LGR, your local government representative. Okay, LCDBG funds, again, should be reported in either a separate capital projects fund or a separate special revenue fund. The revenue and expenditures should be reported clearly. Each project should be separately identified. And if LCDBG funds are reported in or transferred to your enterprise or proprietary fund, or they're otherwise not reported separately from other sources of funds, a supplemental schedule will be required. And this should include a balance sheet and an income statement. And it's typically placed in the back of the audit report. If the grantee is placed on the legislative auditor's non-compliance list, whether the audit is received late or for any other reason, the grantee cannot receive LCDBG funds. Okay, request for payment. Our forms are available on our website, and the website is here. The signatures, like Jimmy said, have to match the authorized signature form exactly as they are typed and signed. If there's a personnel change, again, we need new forms. This is what the RFP form looks like. Okay, you need to fill the form out. You need to print 2 copies. Please sign in blue ink because we do need the originals. And you should attach all the approved invoices and mail everything to our office. The invoices, again, have to be submitted with a request for payment. They need to identify the date the goods and or services were received. If goods are provided, you must identify, or the vendor must identify the quantities and unit cost. If services are rendered, the vendor must state the time period covered by the invoice. For professional services, the vendor must identify the task, the effort in hours, and the hourly rate. And the beginning and ending date should be on all invoices. If other money is being utilized for payment for part of the project, that should be identified on the invoices. And the invoices should be approved by the person with that function as indicated on the financial management questionnaire. Okay, and you can monitor your payments on the DOA ISRAP website. You're gonna first click, and I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see this. You're gonna first click on vendor information. And then you're gonna click on vendor payments /ISIS. You're gonna enter your tax ID number. And then you're gonna click the check all box and click search. Okay, under the optional selection criteria, choose Division of Administration and then click Find Payments. And you're gonna get a list of all of the payments that were made by the Division of Administration. You can sort them with the status change column, and you can get details if you click the check EFT number. And this slide just shows an example of the details that you'll see when you click on that. You're going to see the contract number, the date that it was paid, the dollar amount. Okay, if the RFP is processed by our office by Thursday afternoon, the money should go into the LCDBG account the following Friday. When you're expecting LCDBG funds, make sure that you monitor your account closely and make sure that vendors are paid within 3 business days of receipt of funds. Program income is gross income that is generated by the use of LCDBG funds. This is something that you should not be receiving. If you think that there's a possibility of this, please contact us for instructions. For monitoring purposes, we need a copy of your chart of accounts for your LCDBG fund, your general ledger, income statement, balance sheet, all bank statements that are associated with the time frame of the project, and documentation of current bonding. Okay, we always try to help y'all avoid findings. So these are some of the things that come up frequently. The first couple are based on the financial management questionnaire. It's important, again, to follow the questionnaire. You want individuals performing financial functions to be authorized on the financial management questionnaire. You need to make sure, again, that your bonding or insurance for people signing checks are current. And then the next few are based on your CDBG account. Again, that has to be a separate account. You cannot use a general or clearing account without written permission. And it cannot be interest bearing. You can't deposit other funds into the account. And you have to pay your vendors within 3 business days. The final 2 pertain to your audits. It's important, again, that the reporting clearly shows the revenue and expenditures for LCDBG, and that you submit your report timely. If you have any questions, you can give me or Victoria a call or send us an email. Our information is here. You can also call William, and I apologize, I should add his information.
Okay. Once again, my name is Jimmy Martin. This time we'll be talking about civil rights. Section 3, we're going to start with Section 3. Now, all of these topics I'm covering are in Section A. A is in Apple of the handbook. So if you go to the table of contents, you'll be able to find these different topics real easily. Section 3 was created by the HUD Act of 1968, and its purpose is to ensure economic opportunities for lower income residents and businesses in the area. You have to notify Section 3 residents of employment and training opportunities, and notify contractors of Section 3 requirements at the pre-construction conference discussing both employees and subs. All right, Section 3 applies when the amount of HUD assistance is greater than $200,000. Now, in our regular CDBG program, all of our grants are over $200,000, so Section 3 always applies. However, you may, for this program, you may have the grant may be for less than $200,000, so then Section 3 would not apply. However, if it is over $200,000, this will kick in. But new this year, Section 3 does not apply to administrative or professional entities. So a consultant or an engineer, Section 3 does not apply to them. Section 3 reporting is based on hours now as it worked on the project, not new hires. So, and we have new forms included in for the construction contract bid documents. Once again, all of this is included in Section A and the Exhibit Section A in our grantee handbook. New text for Section 3 compliance and the provision of training, employment, and business opportunities is also listed in the example construction contract. Section 3 utilization report from all primes and subs are required to pay retainage. A Section 3 worker is a worker who currently fits or when hired within the past 5 years meets at least one of the following categories. Income for the previous or annualized calendar years below the income limit established by HUD. The worker is employed by a Section 3 business, or the worker is a youth build participant. A targeted Section 3 worker basically is the same thing, except for they live within the service area of the project. And you have to have 25% of the total hours to Section 3 workers and 5% of total hours to target Section 3 workers. Section 3 business concern is a business concern meeting at least one of the following criteria in the last 6 months. At least 51% are owned or controlled by low or very low income persons. Over 75% of labor hours performed for the business over the prior 3-month period are performed by Section 3 workers, or a business where at least 51% owned and controlled by current public housing residents or residents who currently live in Section 8 assisted housing. 10% total amount of all Section 3 covered contracts should be Section 3 businesses. Now, the service area and the neighborhood of the project means an area within 1 mile of the project. However, if there are fewer than 5,000 people that live within 1 mile of a Section 3 project, then the area expands until 5,000 people meet that radius. If you go to the HUD Section 3 Business Registry website, it will do that for you. You'll put in the location and then it will give you the project. Remember to put in the location of the project and it should tell you if there are any Section 3 businesses in that area. This is important that you do this search before going out to bid and everything, because if a business shows up as being a Section 3 business, then you would probably want to reach out to them and let them know via email, mail, or whatever, look, we're fixing to go out to bid on this project. Okay. Once again, new hires are no longer tracked. In the past, they used to track Section 3 persons by new hires. Now it's by the total hours worked by Section 3 workers. And new this year also is monitoring and compliance is moved from HUD's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office to the local field office. This is a Section 3 utilization report form. We will receive it twice from you. We're going to need it once when you send it in with the clear lien in order to pay retainage to the contractor, and then you will also include this again with closeout documents. Next slide. Okay, now with Section 3, I know this sounds like a big task, a big problem. However, most projects do not meet their Section 3 goals. However, as long as you take the steps to try to meet your Section 3 goals, you will be covered. Normal advertising is no longer enough. In the past, you could just put in your advertisement for bids that you would like Section 3 businesses to apply. However, more things need to be done now. In Section A of our Grantee Handbook, there's a few pages called Good Faith Efforts, and these are things that you can do to try to encourage Section 3. And as long as you took time to do some of these things, even though you probably will not meet your Section 3 goals, as long as you took these steps, you will be fine. Keep a file that shows the attempts and why they were not met. Grantees must certify residents and businesses and keep them on file. So if anybody comes in and says, I'm a Section 3 resident and I would like to be considered for a job, or I'm a Section 3 business owner and I'd like to be considered for any projects, take down information. There's a form to fill out. It's in our exhibits section, and you keep that on file. Once again, the utilization report is due when the retainage is paid and at closeout, and then the complaints are made directly to field officers, and the field officers' addresses can be found at www.hud.gov. Can't stress this enough. With your efforts, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So any efforts that you made to try to get your Section 3 goals, please keep them in a Section 3 file so when we come out and monitor, we can give you credit for it. Next slide. Limited English proficiency, or LEP. Every grantee is required to complete and adopt a language access plan for LEP persons within 1 year of receiving the authorization to incur cost letter. And that must be reviewed and updated annually thereafter. It must include a 4-factor analysis. Now, There are some frequently asked questions that you can find to create your language access plan. Those two websites are listed there. One is on the HUD website, and the other is at www.lep.gov. To gather the information in order to put the data into your language access plan, use census.gov for statistics. That is form S as in Sam 1601. In the past, you had to go to American Fact Finder to get this. American Fact Finder no longer exists. The easiest way to get this table is do a web search for census.gov S/1601 language spoken at home. The handbook has a link to the table, and you'll have to change the parameters for your parish, village, town, or city. If in fact you have, sometimes you have to translate vital documents. If you have 1,000 or more LEP persons, you would need to translate. If it's more than 5% and more than 50, you would have to translate. If it's more than 5% and 50 or less, you'd only have to translate written notice of their right to receive free oral interpretation. And the last category, 5% or less than 1,000, no written translation required. For the most part, most of you will come into that last unless you are a larger city or parish. Next. Google Translate can be a helpful tool, especially if somebody walks in off the street and they speak a language, say they speak Spanish, and whoever's manning the front desk doesn't speak Spanish. Using Google Translate can be helpful to at least figure out what they want and how to get things started. It's not the best thing in the world. However, it can be helpful. It can at least get that initial ball rolling. An example of our language access plan is available in the Exhibits A section of our handbook, so you can see how we worked ours for the state of Louisiana. It doesn't have to be done that way. You do have to do the full factor analysis. I created it on my own by looking up other states and other entities and kind of threw one together and tailor-made it for us. So don't think that you have to do it exactly the way we do it, but that is a guide for you to be able to do it. You're also covered by Section 504. Rehabilitation Act of 1973 requires a grantee to comply with non-discrimination based on handicap status for HUD programs. The objective is that no qualified individual with handicaps can be excluded from a project, a program, or an activity. Minimum requirements. We require a 504 assurance that's in the Exhibit A section. Part of the requirement is part of this is a requirement to clear contract conditions. And there's 2 paragraphs on our 504 assurance. Both sections should be completed if you have 15 or more employees. If you are a small town and have less than 15 employees, you'd only have to do the first paragraph. If you are a larger town or a parish and you have 15 or more employees, then you have to do both paragraphs of that form. The self-evaluation of current policies and practices in the areas of communication, employment, and program physical accessibility is needed. Maintain data showing individuals that are beneficiaries of the program. You also need to have a functioning TDD or LA relay system. Once again, that's included in Section A when it comes to guidelines. The number must be advertised in the paper within 6 months of the AIC letter and operate 24 hours if you have emergency service. Grantees with 15 or more employees have other steps that they need to take. You have to designate a 504 coordinator. You have to prepare and adopt the grievance procedure of any complaints and keep records on file of grievances and resolution. Place a notice in the town hall or publish in a newspaper that the grantee does not discriminate on the basis of handicap, and that needs to be done within 90 days of receipt of the executed grant agreement. Check Section A for the current language. The language changed 15, 20 years ago, but people still sometimes have up the old one that's been up on the bulletin board in town hall for years. Make sure that the language is the same as it is now. It should also identify the 504 coordinator in the posting and maintain a 504 file for monitoring. When you do your self-evaluation, evaluate your current policies, modify policies that don't meet requirements, take steps to remedy discrimination revealed in the evaluation. For areas covered, the building or facilities for physical access, program and services accessibility, communications, and employment includes pre-employment. If you acquire a building built prior to 1988, you must complete an evaluation of that building. For summary of previous actions taken, for prior grantee who has completed a self-evaluation, you've gone through a transition plan and all of that, you need to do a summary of previous actions taken. An example is in our A section in exhibits. You do a summary of your past plans, deficiencies found, and any corrections that you may have made. You must do a complete self-evaluation if you don't have a complete summary. Fair housing. Basically, nobody can be subjected to discrimination for any of these reasons: race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familiar status, or national origin, the sale, rental, advertisement of dwellings. Actions do not have to be intentional to be a violation. So if you're trying to help out one specific group in a population and it excludes another, you've created a violation, even though you were trying to help out one particular group who may have been excluded in the past. You can't exclude one group to help out another. Some examples of what is prohibited and examples of discrimination are in our handbook. Requirements for fair housing: you must affirmatively affirm fair housing. In the past, you could just put up a flyer in town hall or in the courthouse saying fair housing, it's your right, or anything. We now ask that one more activity be done in addition to that. Once again, in our handbook, in the exhibits A section, there's examples of different things you can do. One of the easiest things to do is to declare April Fair Housing Month, do a resolution. You can post a flyer in City Hall, but once again, that's no longer enough. You can do seminars for the public to let them know about fair housing rights. If you do something like that, you need to have it kind of in the evening when people are off of work and they can come to the meetings. Maintain documentation of that activity in your file for monitoring. And if you get any housing complaints, they should go to either HUD or to Louisiana Department of Justice. Exhibits A section has the numbers. Make sure your citizens are aware of this information. You also have to do a fair housing assessment. You need to consider impediments. Fair housing choice. Everyone must have available to them the same housing choices. The grantee should be involved in preparing, even if, say, a consultant prepares the form. You know your area best, and so somebody at City Hall, at the courthouse, whatever, should help the preparer of this document prepare the document. Both the preparer and the chief elected official must sign this document. It's broken down into a few parts. Part 1 deals with housing profile, rental units, public housing, mortgage lending, real estate brokers, zoning ordinances, and building codes. Part 2, where you review the fair housing practices for each of those parts that you identified in Part 1. Look at loan applications, loan approval procedures, advertising, appraisals, degree of segregation. You have to list who you talked to and what you reviewed for each section in Part 2. Part 3 should only be marked in A if the same category is marked in A and marked in Part 2. So if you don't have in Part 1, let's say you say that you don't have any zoning ordinances. Well, then in Part 2, you could put not applicable. Well, then in Part 3, you can put not applicable as well. However, you can't use not applicable if you have zoning ordinances. So if you put yes for that, for Part 2 and Part 3, you have to put yes or no. You cannot put not applicable. And once again, and we've had some issues with this, the assessment should be signed by both the preparer and the chief elected official. Another thing that that you'll have to do initially to clear grant conditions is you're going to do a fair housing assurance. And in that assurance, you're going to assure OCD that there have been no findings made by or open complaints with the HUD Fair Housing or Equal Opportunity Office of the Louisiana Attorney General, and that the grantee will notify OCD that if any time in the future there is a complaint filed. That exhibit is also in the A section. You also have to encourage minority businesses and women-owned businesses. The easiest way to do this is put this in your advertisement for bids. Encourage women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses to apply. There is a website that you can do a search. You can put in the area, and it'll show up depending on what parameters you put in. It'll pull up minority businesses or women-owned businesses in your area. You're also going to be required to do a minority report that's due in October. You'll get an email and a letter from us in September, but you will only report on new contracts that were awarded between 10/1 and 9/30. So once you get into the second year of the grant, if you reported on a specific contract the year before, you don't have to do it the second year. You only report on it one time. Equal employment opportunity, must follow EEO guidelines. Have your posters up where your employees can see them. Additional things you can do, put equal opportunity employer on your letterhead, and you must also maintain employment data. You can use a workforce analysis, which we have in our exhibits A, or you can use the HUD form EEO4. Keep that, and then we'll look at it when we come monitor. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about procurement. The basic requirement, all governments must have a written procurement policy. Next slide. If you want to know what a procurement policy should consist of, we have on our website the procurement procedures, and at the end you'll find a listing of all the requirements for procurement policy. Now, obviously, smaller governments aren't going to need everything on there, so you need to review that and make sure you have what you need. One big change that occurred in the federal regulations a few years ago is an explicit prohibition on anyone assisting you in a solicitation must be excluded from participating in that procurement. So there are three things that the records have to show: the method of procurement chosen for your purchase, the type of contract that you've selected, and the type of price that you utilize in your contract. Next slide. So under methods, there are 4 choices under the federal regulations. Next slide. Micro purchases, small purchases, sealed bids, and competitive proposals. Next slide. The first 3 are purchases based upon the price, assuming that there's a product or a set of specifications that all vendors can offer you a price based upon the description. Competitive proposals, on the other hand, are a combination of price as well as specifications. And you don't need to select your vendor for a competitive proposal strictly on the basis of price. Next slide. So when you do competitive proposals, in addition to price, you consider the qualitative or technical factors in addition to the price of your offers. Next slide. So under federal rules, there are 3 different types of contracts. The first type is a fixed price contract. Fixed price contract, the vendor offer contractor will receive the entire amount of the price of the contract, assuming satisfactory performance. It assumes also that there's a fixed outcome of your purchase. For instance, when you do a building construction, you have a set of specifications that yield to a certain result, and upon that result, you pay the contractor the full price. Cost reimbursement are situations, typically with professional services, where you can't predict the outcome, that there are variables in the providing of the service that can vary with the nature of the contract. So you set a ceiling for the contract, but you may not necessarily pay all of that amount if the work didn't require it. And the third type that's used in only certain circumstances are time and materials contract, when the contract offer services are so hard to describe or define that you're basically paying someone for their efforts and no particular outcome. Next slide. So within your contracts, there are 4 types of prices. Next slide. A lump sum price, where there's a total, typically with your construction contracts, there's a final end price that's based upon the sealed bid and the competitive selection. A unit price is a fixed price with several iterations of the same item. So you agree upon a price to produce a certain product and then multiply that times the number of units you consumed. The third type of price are billable hours, which you typically have for professional services. So you set an hourly rate for your service and pay them according to the hours worked. Finally, reimbursable cost can be part of or incorporated into billable hours, where you have additional costs besides your labor costs that you reimburse your contractor. Next slide. So when we do certain professional services, you're required to provide us a copy of the of your solicitation before you begin your solicitation. Once you've selected a contractor, you're not allowed to terminate these services without permission from our office. Next slide. Professional services typically are administrative, consulting, and architectural engineering firms. If they've not worked in our program before, then they're required to have a contractor clearance that you have to obtain from our office. Next slide. So this is an important change we've done, that we've incorporated in our program. We must review all the solicitations before you issue them for professional services, so we can ensure that all of the requirements of the solicitation are met. Next slide. So records, we want to see advertisements, copy of advertisements of your solicitations, description of your method of evaluating competitive proposals, copies of all the proposals, qualification statements received, written evaluations of those proposals, and we must see the basis for a cost reasonableness, which either is, if it's based on a price competition, evidence of the price competition. If not, then an analysis of the cost that the vendor is offering. Next slide. So the thresholds that we talked about under the price competition, micro purchases can be up to $10,000, where you don't need formal quotes. Small purchase under state law for materials and supplies are up to $30,000. And if it's over $30,000, then you have to use competitive sealed bid method under state law. Next. Non-competitive negotiation There are several reasons you can do non-competitive negotiation, but the only one we typically encounter in this program is when there's inadequate competition. If that occurs in your solicitation, then you have to give, you have to provide an executed document to us describing the solicitation process and the reason for non-competition. When you contact us, we'll give you a format for doing that. Next slide. So sealed bids under state law. And this is the solicitation method that's required in our state for every public body. You have to publish once a week for 3 weeks. You must give 25 days before the bid opening from your first announcement. Next slide. In addition, certain parishes and municipalities under the population thresholds, 20,000 for parish governments, 10,000 for municipalities. You must also provide, in addition to the advertisement, you must also provide for an electronic bidding process. Next slide. So there are both, you can do it on your own website if you have that capability, or you can go through a commercial advertiser and post your solicitations on their website. Next slide. So when we do that, we have to see a copy of the solicitation as well as all addenda, as well as the items that meet the contractor's guide you'll find in our handbook. You have to maintain copies of the bid opening, the roster of attendees, and tabulation of all bids. And under state law, you have 45 days to either award or reject as a sealed bid. You can extend that with your lowest bidder for 30 days. Next slide. So here's the basic calendar, including the maximum amounts of extensions. So 25 days is the earliest you can do your bid opening after your first announcement. Then you have the option of 45 days after that for a total of 70 days to make the award. And you also have extensions that can go out 30 days. Next slide. You also have to issue any addendas to keep your 25 days. The latest day that you can issue that, you must issue is 22 days. After that, you have to proceed with the original bid opening. Next slide. So in cases where you have costs that exceed bids, you need to contact our engineer, Jeff Tessier, and he'll discuss with you the possible solutions to that. Next slide. So once your sealed bid is accomplished, you make your award of your contract, execute the contract documents, hold a pre-construction conference, and then issue the notice to proceed. And any change orders have to be approved by our office. Next slide. Okay.
My name is Jeff Tessier. I am the engineer for the Office of Community Development, Local Government Assistance. It all starts, a grant has 3 parts. It all starts with the application. From the application comes the ERR and the plans and specifications. They all need to agree with each other. The scope of work to be performed must be the same in each one. In fact, in the first review of the plans and specs, I pull out the application and the ERR, compare the 3. At this time, it's actually a great time for the mayor or the parish president to set up a meeting with the engineer and the grant consultant to review the application to make sure everyone is in agreement on how to proceed. Next slide. Okay. What if something needs to be changed? It's all about communication. The engineer could be working on the plans and specs and has to add a drain line or some type of activity that would cause ground disturbance. As far as engineering or construction goes, it's a very minor change. But with regards to the ERR, it could be a huge change. So Any changes, I'm speaking to the engineer right now, any changes, no matter how small, must be communicated to the grant consultant and the grantee. Now, let's say the grant consultant's working on the ERR and new site information is discovered that wasn't known before, or things need to be modified from the application. Any information or modification needs to be communicated to the engineer and to the grantee. It's very important y'all keep communicating with each other no matter how minor the change. And if things really get complicated or you need help or have any questions, feel free to call us at any time. We're here and as a resource for you. Next. Just to drive this point home, think of a grant as a three-legged stool. You need all three legs to support the grant. Next. The engineer will submit the following for review: plans, specifications, an updated cost estimate. This should be off the latest information from the plans and specifications. We need just the transmittal letters to all the reviewing agencies. In this case, fire marshal, LDH, and whatever permitting agencies. We need those transmittals. And we need you to submit all addendums, even if it's just an updated wage decision or you're postponing bids. We need you to submit all addendums. Next. After construction starts, how do you submit a change order? Well, change orders, most of it's pretty much the same. You have your math, which is the changes in contract price, your reasonings on why you're submitting the change orders, and your signatures. Now, we have a very specific order on signatures of change orders. This is for our office. We need the engineer and contractor to sign and date the change order. The date is the date of their signature. Submit the change order to me, I'll review it, and if approved, I will sign and date the change order and send it back to you. Then you get the mayor or parish president to sign and date the change order. With that, you can keep as many copies as you want, but we need at least one copy to get back to us with all signatures on it. Next. Some things can be emailed, but some things still need to be mailed in the old-fashioned way. Any change orders, addendums, RPR certifications, anything time sensitive you really need to get to us, you can email it in. Plans and specifications, we need that mailed in. If there are any large attachments, let's say you have an addendum with a full-size drawing, I need that to be mailed in. So basically plans and specs mailed in, everything else can be emailed. Next. All inspectors on the project need to be approved. This is the form that needs to be submitted along with the inspector's resume. Next. This more goes to our regular program, but there was a time when inspectors were approved separately for each grant, but to streamline the process or lessen paperwork, we've established a qualified resident project representative database. The qualification is the same: submit the form, submit the resume, but after that RPR is qualified, there's no need to submit the resume again. So if you're working on different projects later on in the future with CDBG, you can still have the same project representative. When the grant is monitored, however, we will need to see that the RPR is signing the inspection reports and the grant representatives will check our database. If you have any questions for me, you can put it in the Q&A or in the chat. If you need my direct contact information to contact me, ask for it in the Q&A or the chat and they will get that to you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Phoenicia Favorite, and I will be presenting on the environmental review record. The federal requirements that govern the environmental review process are under 24 CFR Part 58. Each of the program participants must implement their program in compliance with the NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. For all projects, special attention must be given to 24 CFR Part 4.32, which is project aggregation. The program requirements require that all contract conditions must be cleared within 5 months. We ask that the environmental review record is received by our office within 4 months to ensure sufficient time for review and revisions if necessary. The grantee's chief elected official will assume all responsibility over the environmental review process, and they must sign all certifications and findings. The environmental review clearance levels. The first level is exempt, and that includes environmental studies, project planning, and administrative costs. The next level is the categorically excluded, not subject to 58.5, and that includes operating costs and equipment. The next 2 levels are going to be common on the HVAC program, and that's categorically excluded activities subject to 58.5 and activities requiring environmental assessments. Just a reminder that with the activities that require an environmental assessment, if you have any ground disturbance on these projects, it will require an environmental assessment. And then the last area, which is not as common, is an environmental impact statement. For activities requiring an environmental assessment, these are the publication and posted combined notice comment periods. So if you publish the combined notice, it's a 15-day comment period. And if you post the combined notice, then it's going to be an 18-day comment period. And your request for release of funds should be dated the date after your comment period ends. Then you would mail the the request for release of funds to our office, and the state has a 15-day comment period as well. The next slide shows you the dates for the categorical exclusion subject to 58.5 comment period. For publications, it's only 7 days, and for posted notices, it's 10 days. The next slide is a new requirement that the HVAC program does require. It's an ASTM Phase 1 environmental site assessment. And this is going to be required for all HVAC programs. The ASTM is the American Society of Testing and Materials. All property being proposed for use in HUD programs must be free of hazardous materials, contamination, toxic chemicals and gases, and radioactive substances, where a hazard could affect the health and safety of occupants or conflict with the intended utilization of the property. And this is under 24 CFR Part 58.5. The site assessment must follow the ASTM Standard E 1527-05. Under the Phase 1 ESA, it is a systematic research of current and past on-site and surrounding property uses that could affect the environment. This should be conducted or supervised by a qualified environmental professional, and that includes the interviews and the review of the historical and regulatory records. These ESAs must include a site inspection, and the site inspection also should include radon testing and lead-based paint or asbestos testing if applicable. The interpretation of the ESA data and conclusion should also be included, and it should be presented in a written report in a standardized format. Mold must be addressed in the assessment, and mold testing must also take place. For more information on the Phase 1 ESA, there's a link on HUD to some more information. ERR clearance. All records, permits, site assessments, remediation efforts, mitigation measures, and the 8-step process should be included in the notices. The request for release of funds must be signed by the chief elected official after the end of the local public comment period. All activities must be environmentally cleared, including those funded by private funds. Until the state has approved the recipient's request for release of funds, neither a grantee nor any participant may commit LCDBG HUD funds or undertake any activity on the project. This regulation is triggered when the grantee's application is submitted to the state. Revised environmental review records. If the project site or location changes, then the ERR must be amended. All compliance areas must be reconsidered and all relevant agencies must be contacted. OCD will review all changes once submitted and issue a new clearance. For environmental assessment projects, if there's no change in determinations, you only have to submit the revised ERR. However, if there is a change in determination, you will have to post or publish your finding notice again. These are a list of common errors that we find when reviewing the environmental review records. Some things include not including all of the required maps or not including enough information on the maps, not including whether the project is site specific or not listing all proposed activities in the project description, not following the request from the tribes, not signing and dating forms that require signatures, not discussing alternatives in the 8-step process, and your request for release of funds not on one page. Missing documentation to support your determinations, and not making sure that the statutory worksheet and checklists match. The dates, names, etc. should be the same on both the worksheet and the checklist. Please make sure that you review your entire ERR before turning it in to help minimize errors. If you have any questions, you can contact me, Phoenicia Favorite. That's my email address. My direct number is 225-342-5884. And Layla Argrave also helps to review environmental review records, and she can be contacted as well.
Well, once again, my name is Jimmy Martin, and I'll be talking about labor standards right now. There are 5 regulations/requirements that we cover that deal with labor. Davis-Bacon, which is the Davis-Bacon Act and Davis-Bacon related acts, deals with prevailing wages. Copeland, which is the Antitrust Act, and that is dealt with payroll, statements of compliance and deductions. QASA, which is overtime, being paid at time and a half. Louisiana law as opposed to federal law, so the state law is more stringent than the state law governs. And then also any program requirements that we require at LCDBG. What is Davis-Bacon? Davis-Bacon Act versus Davis-Bacon related acts is federal law. Our projects deal with Davis-Bacon related acts. It covers a minimum payments to laborers and mechanics for work done on CDBG projects. It's designed to prevent out-of-area contractors from underbidding local contractors. And it covers all federally funded contracts over $2,000. So obviously Davis-Bacon will apply to these grants. It ensures prevailing wages, and contractors must meet at a minimum the wage requirements set forth in a wage decision. A wage decision looks like this. As you can see, for different laborers and mechanics, basically a mechanic is anybody that's not a laborer. You can see the rate that the minimum rates that they must be paid, and some of them have fringes also. So a power equipment operator listed as an oiler needs to make at least $8.59 an hour and $2.50 worth of fringes. A laborer, common laborer, would make $8.20 an hour, but notice there are no fringes in that. And so once again, these are the minimum amounts. Obviously, the contractors can pay over that, and most of them do. What is Copeland? Copeland is the Anti-Kickback Act. It deals with federal law. It outlaws paying the employee kickbacks. It requires weekly payrolls with statements of compliance. It requires permission for pay deductions not required by law. There's an authorization form in Section B of our handbook. So anytime there are other deductions other than, say, taxes, FICA, state taxes, anything like that, that's being deducted out of the employee's paycheck, and that includes union dues. You have to have a payroll deduction authorization signed by that employee where he gives the employer the ability to take that money out of his paycheck. What is QASA? QASA is the Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards Act. It's federal law that requires time and a half pay for any hours worked in excess of 40 during a work week. If there is a QASA violation, there's a liquidated damage category as well. It's $27 per person per day for any hours in excess of 40 in a given work week. It used to, the penalty used to be $10, and it went to 25, then it went to 26. It's been 27 for a while now, so I kind of expect it to go up to 28 sometime in the near future, but as of right now, it's still $27 per person per day. In addition, restitution must be paid to the worker. Two methods to address liquidated damages: penalties. The good thing, and we hope that they all work out this way, is the contractor requests a waiver. Suppose he underpaid somebody that worked 41 hours and he paid him straight time for 41 hours. Well, and he goes, oh, I just made an honest mistake. He outlines the honest mistake. He pays the extra money to his employee and sends on to us a request for that damage, for liquidated damages to be waived. I forward that request on to HUD, and hopefully they grant it, and then you don't have to worry about the violation. You still have to obviously pay the restitution to the employee, but you don't have to pay the liquidated damages. If for some reason the waiver is not granted, as you can see from the frowny face there, then the contractor pays HUD by wire transfer. It's a long process. It's a detailed process. Hopefully any problems we'll be able to deal with via waiver. Examine of labor exhibits. These are all in section B of our handbook. A wage decision, a verification of wage decision and contract eligibility. You have a notice of contract award, report of additional classification and rate, record of employee interview form, the payroll form, and the statement of compliance, which is the HUD WH-347, the payroll review flow chart, payroll deduction authorization, notice of restitution due. The first form we're going to talk about is the verification of wage decision and contract eligibility. You've had your bids, you've opened up, you've had your bid opening, and you determine that John Doe Construction is the company you want to go with. There's a form called verification of wage decision and contract eligibility. First of all, you're going to put on there the wage decision that you believe is the correct one, and you're also going to put the information for the contractor. You need to include the DUNS number for the contractor, as well as for all known subs. And these DUNS numbers must be active on www.sam.gov. It's not good enough just to have a DUNS number. It needs to be active on that website. If a subcontractor is later added, suppose they don't know which subs they're going to use right off the bat, that subcontractor's number must be active prior to that sub beginning work. And the reason that we request that is that, say a sub comes in and works for a week, and then you find out later that that DUNS number was not active. Well, we can't pay that sub. Or suppose by accident that sub gets paid. Well, then we have no leverage to go back and tell him, well, you need to get a DUNS number active on SAM. And we should be notified of any new subs. This is what the verification of wage decision and contract eligibility form looks like. Notice highlighted in yellow there is the DUNS number of the prime, and then you have the columns for additional subcontractors, and then a spot for their DUNS number. The top part of the form deals with the wage decision, and then from the middle down deals with the prime and subcontractors. The chronological steps: you obtain a wage decision, you prepare your bid documents, and that wage decision goes into your bid documents. You advertise for bids, You have a 10-day responsibility. It's important 10 days prior to the bid opening to check to make sure that that wage decision is still the active one, because the Department of Labor updates wage decisions as the year progresses. You have the bid opening. You fill out the form, the verification of contract eligibility. You send it to us. Once we approve the wage decision and the contract eligibility, you can then award the contract. You fill out the notice of contract award and send it back to us. You have a pre-construction conference, which is now required. Talking to the contractor, you may see that they need a mechanic category that's not listed on a wage decision. That's when you would request from us an additional classification. You send it to us and we forward it on the HUD. You're going to conduct employee interviews. You're going to examine those payrolls, and it's best to do them weekly, because you don't want, like, a contractor finishes up, gets paid, and he's gone, and all of a sudden then you start looking at payrolls and there are all kinds of errors on the payrolls. Well, you've lost your leverage if the contractor has been paid. So corrective actions such as restitution, liquidated damages, if you find any issues. We're going to do a labor standards enforcement report. We're going to monitor. The OCD staff is going to monitor labor when we come out. Any corrective action to address any findings of deficiency, and then as part of the closeout documents, you will send in a final wage compliance report. Finding a current wage decision, you're going to go to this website here, and next slide. And then you're going to use your drop-down boxes there on the left. You can see what you're going to select the state you're in, the parish you're in, and what type of contract it is. For these projects, it would be a building. And then you're going to get different choices. You'll click on it and you'll find the building one, and that's the wage decision you think you would go with. If for some reason you have any issues, feel free to contact me, and I can walk you through that process. Okay. This is page 2 of what a payroll looks like. This is the statement of compliance. Notice at the top is where the signing party is going to sign up there. The person down in the bottom right, that is where that's going to be the signature, and that should be an officer of the company. If for some reason an officer of the company is not signing that payroll authorization, then there needs to be a letter accompanying the payrolls authorizing that person to sign the payrolls. This is a legal document. So basically you are accepting all responsibility that this is correct, this is true, and that to the best of your knowledge. Also, you see the 2 green circles there talking about fringes. If some of your employees involve fringes, box A would be if you're paying fringes into a plan, and box B would be if you're paying cash for both. So say like if they're supposed to make $10 an hour and $3 an hour in fringes, and you're just going to pay $13 an hour, then you would mark box B. If you're paying $10 an hour plus, which goes into, and then the other $3 goes into an approved plan, you would mark box A. We talked about the report of additional classification. The top part of the form will be filled out. Once again, suppose there's a mechanic that's not on the wage decision. The contractor will get with the grantee and have this form filled out. You'll fill out all the way to where you see stop here, where check all that apply on down. That is filled out by us and by HUD. So only fill out the top portion of the document. Payroll deduction. This is once again if there's some things other than taxes and FICA being taken out. This is what a payroll deduction authorization form looks like. We have an example of this in our exhibits, and you list all the deductions and the amounts. If they do a percentage, suppose you take out a percentage of the employee's wages weekly, then obviously the percentage, say 5%, when I look at the list, I'm gonna take 5% of that gross pay and match that number up. So that's the only thing. So with the percentage, that's the only time that you're gonna see something that's not the number. If you take out $5 a week for pay for uniforms, I should see uniforms $5. And if things change, then a new form is needed going forward. Okay. Some common problems that we see, and it's marked laborers, laborers, laborers. And basically that is the excessive use of labor classification. Laborers are obviously the cheapest form of employees on the thing. And a lot of times they contract and may say, well, I use a lot of laborers. But then when we look at inspection reports, we find out that there was an electrician there, but all we see is laborers on that payroll. Well, obviously they're trying to circumvent Davis-Bacon, and then we have an issue. So if you're reviewing payrolls and you see only laborers and you know it's an electrical company, well, there ought to at least be one electrician on there, obviously doing some work. Okay, next. Final wage compliance report. This is submitted with the closeout documents. It reports all restitution and absence of restitution on the Davis-Bacon and Quassa. We will remind you at monitoring to include restitution in the fair wage compliance report. And as the labor compliance officer, whoever that is for the grantee should ensure that it's there. Must be approved by OCD before the grant can be closed out, and any labor findings must be cleared. If there are any outstanding labor issues such as restitution, liquidated damages, unapproved additional classifications, those must be corrected before we can close out the grant. Thank you.
Okay, we are in the home stretch, everyone. We just have a few more slides and then we'll be finished. So I also wanted to let y'all know that we're going to post the slides on our website later today, and we're also recording this. So we'll have it on our YouTube channel. I don't know how long that takes to get it up there, but probably by next week if you want to go back and look at the presentation, because it's just very riveting. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about monitoring closeouts and program amendments. So as one of our federal requirements, we have to monitor every project, and we will send a letter requesting documents when the grant is 25% expended. You will have 30 days to submit those requested documents. We will review the documents and provide any technical assistance if needed. Review checklists are included in exhibit in the section E of our LCDBG handbook. And we are conducting a review in an effort to reduce findings when we go to on-site monitoring. So each grant will be monitored on-site when 50% of the grant funds have been requested by the grantee. OCD staff will review all compliance areas as well as view the project site. So that means if, I know one of the places had a school, so we'll have to go to the school and see the project. So the monitoring checklists are included as an exhibit in section E of the handbook and will be updated online as new guidance is available. We will send the grantee a monitoring report upon completion, and they will be required to respond to any findings of deficiency noted during the monitoring. For closeout, in order to receive a conditional closeout, improvements construction undertaken with grant funds must be in full operation. You have to submit one copy of the program completion report for the most recent grant year. Submit 3 copies of the certificate of completion, must be original signatures. They must be original signatures, and submit a clean lien certificate. And all findings of deficiency must be cleared. In order to receive a final closeout, all conditions must be met in order to be approved for a conditional closeout. All financial reports and audits covering expenditures of all LCDBG funds have been received and accepted. So if you need to do a program amendment during the during your program, they are required when a single or cumulative change to the program budget is greater than 10% of the grant award amount or changes that result in the deletion or addition of an activity or item. They must be submitted by the grantee. Funds remaining due to cost underruns may be used with prior approval by OCD through a request for program amendment. The project must continue to be fundable based on the proposed changes and be approved and not require an amendment to the ERR. Some changes that become necessary for project implementation do not involve a change in scope of work or a number of project beneficiaries and may not require a full program amendment. If you're unsure, just contact our office and we'll work with you. These program changes generally must be requested in writing by the grantee. The request should describe the intended change to the project and statements regarding whether the change will affect the intent scope of the project, the number of project beneficiaries, and the environmental review record. Oops, sorry. So changes to approved projects, OCD must be contacted anytime a grantee seeks to make changes. Amendments and or project changes to the approved LCDB project can neither be requested nor approved through submittal of engineering change orders only. Major reductions in the scope of proposed work could result in adverse state action, grant reduction, termination, or a finding of eligibility for future funding. Please note that any changes that are not necessary to complete the originally approved project and or require an amendment to be originally approved, ERR will not be considered. So grant performance factors, this is mostly for our annual project, but I'll just go through it really quick because we have some grantees that do participate in that. A second contract or contract extension was required in order to complete or close out the grant. Penalties were assessed at any point during the grant due to failure to meet required benchmark, and a finding of deficiency identified as very serious was issued during the grant. So these are the contacts for everyone who spoke today. If you have any questions or concerns, please let us know. We will be getting out the grant reps will be contacting you very soon, hopefully within the next week, to get everything rolling. And I guess that's really all I've got. Thank y'all for joining us. And like I said, we are here to be a resource for y'all. So if y'all have any questions, and I know for those of you who are not familiar with our program are probably incredibly overwhelmed, you are not alone. We are going to help you through it. That is what your consultants and your engineers are also for as well. And thank y'all for applying. We're really excited about this project. We're finished, so y'all can go enjoy some lunch or take a break. Thank you.